Welcome to Dare a New Belief, a place to discover what is possible for your life after the loss of a loved one, and where you will find inspiration, insight, support, and love, and hopefully a bit of laughter to help you through your day. Now, here's your host, Nada Hogan.
A New Belief, where you will find light and life, love and joy, healing, faith, and hope. A place where you get to believe in what is possible for your life. And today I have the great honor and privilege to have Donna Mathiowetz with me. Donna is an inspirational speaker and author and strives to leave a legacy of hope, healing, and forgiveness by sharing her story of loss, grief, and resiliency. She began working in the arena of loss and grief in 1997. Following the death of two teenage sons within 2 years of each other. Donna is the author of What Have You Done Since I Left? And A Journal for Your Journey. She has also created a card deck. And Donna has been married to a wonderful man, Dick, for 48 years. And they have 4 beautiful children, 3 very special grandchildren, and have fostered 3 children from 3 different countries. Donna, thank you for being here.
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for asking me.
I'm thrilled to have you here and to dive into this. So I don't know you. So for the listeners to know, I don't know you. Most of the time I do know the people who I invite in, or at least I know something about them. And you were referred to me. And I was going to come to a book signing because you just released a new book and my schedule did not work out with your schedule. So I haven't even had a chance to have a conversation with you except for right now. So I'm thrilled to dive into this. But the first place I want to go is, how is it that you became an inspirational speaker and an author? I know that you had lost 2 sons. And if we could start there, because, in my story, that's how this whole podcast came about, is I lost my daughter 12 years ago. So can we start there with the tragedy of losing your son, Tim?
I sure can. Yes. I mean, I never aspired to be an author or an inspirational speaker, but sometimes life circumstances takes us to places we had never thought about. And getting there by way of losing 2 children wouldn't be the route that I would have, of course, chosen to be able to be where I am. But yeah, so our journey of grief and loss began, it was 1992. So at the time we're recording all this, it's, 28 years ago, more than 28 years ago. We live in Hastings, Minnesota. At that time had 2 children. Our daughter Jill was 18, had just graduated from high school. And our son Tim was 16, a sophomore at the high school here in town. Mm-hmm. And this particular Friday night, Tim went to a party, a gathering with about a dozen other teens, which I always, that add on there, I always say a group of teenagers with all of them sharing many things. And one thing they shared was their yet to be developed brains. Because they simply, the brain is not done growing at that age. And so I think that's part of what caused such a terrible ending to that night. But so the kids were there was some beer, and there was a 19-year-old acquaintance. I didn't know this young man before, but he carried a .44 caliber Magnum handgun. And I had talked to Tim at 8:00 that night on the phone, and an hour later, he was shot and killed with that gun by the owner of the gun. So it put us into a world of, unimaginable pain and grief and confusion. We're talking 28 years ago when this type of news was a phenomenon. We just didn't hear of it. Unfortunately, we all know where we are now, where we hear of it on a daily, sometimes multiple times a day, of these type of things happening. But it happened in little sleepy Hastings, a little community of 10,000 people, and it was unfortunately pretty newsworthy. And that made it hard too, because it was very, very public. Our pain was very public. But we began there, and we joined a group called Compassionate Friends, which is a huge international organization that is just for bereaved parents. And I'm sure you're aware of that group too, Nada. Yeah. And we went there for a while, over a year. But about a year and a half after Tim's death, we had the opportunity to become a family to a young boy. And this is I could speak another session just about how all this transpired. But we were asked to take in this boy. He was found in a Ukrainian orphanage. His name was Oleg, and he had cancer. And a friend of ours was there arranging for adoptions from there into the U.S., and she had met Oleg, and on another trip back realized that he was very sick, and she became very determined to get him out of the orphanage and to the U.S. and to find doctors. And so through an organization called Healing the Children, was able to find that everybody, all the puzzle pieces fit together, and we became part of that team of people who would make sure Oleg could come and have a place to be. And so he did, and that was a year and a half after Tim's death. So we saw him through, all the chemo. He was inpatient once a month for his chemo. He lived a full life. It was just very brief. He died 6.5 months later, after what looked like he was rallying and things might be going in our favor. And then, as cancer unfortunately does too often, it turned the other way, and we lost him. So we experienced this very sudden death of Tim, where I saw him off to school on a Friday morning. The next time I saw him was on a Monday afternoon, laying in his casket. And then we had Oleg, who I mothered him, literally and figuratively to death. I got to do all for him that I was robbed of with Tim, just because of the circumstances. So it was quite an experience, and it threw us into a whole new world, of course, and meeting other people who had also lost children. And then about 5 years after the boys died, we became active and helped to organize, put together a grief support group right here in Hastings, and became, we were there every week and speaking and facilitating small groups. And and anyone, I think, who's been able to reach out and help someone else knows that there is healing in that too. It was part of what we needed to, because we were, light years ahead of some who just had suffered their loss last week. So, I think we knew people needed to see hope by us being there and appearing to be having adjusted somehow to a new normal, and could now get up and put one foot in front of the other most days, not every day, but most days. So that was our journey. And I've been doing this type of work ever since, and, in a little bigger way as I began to write the books. And the book you mentioned, What Have You Done Since I Left, that just actually came out about 6 weeks ago. So, and it tells a lot more about the entire story of Oleg, and then we adopted a special needs child, and we fostered 3 children from foreign countries. And again, any of the above would never have been on my bucket list ever. I'm pretty sure, but because of course, don't we all have our own plan how it's all going to go, right? When it changes that drastically, it makes you rethink everything. And so we just chose a different way. And, I really am grateful that I can take something like what I've just described and use it to help other people, because it doesn't feel quite so useless if we can use it to help someone else.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. And bless your heart. I mean, my heart just dropped. It's, wow. I mean, it's just the tragedy of losing a child that, and with a gun involved. I don't know why that just seems to add such a extra element pain and depth to that. And
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
I guess what I would like to ask you is, so after Tim's passing, how how did you find yourself and your husband and the rest of your family? How were you able to come to terms with that in a way that was meaningful for all of you, and yet still able to be on the path of grief? Because we still have to grieve. And I know there's days that we just don't get out of bed because we just can't. But
That's right.
obviously,
That's
you
right.
were doing something, and I wonder, is it inner faith, or was it um, just your belief? What was it that helped you and your family move through this in the
Yeah.
beginning?
I do think there was, we happened to live in a great community of people, and had been involved in, um, you know, a big mission trip that involved 12 churches. And, so the faith community was huge for us. Not that, as we know, not that anything they could physically do to make it all better, but knowing they were there, and who knows how many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people were praying for us. I know that all made a difference. It's not palpable. It's not something I can touch, but I knew it was there, because I don't know how else I would have even functioned to the point I was. And you think about, and that whole family grief. So as I said, our daughter Jill was 18, had just gotten set up to go to college, and she did go off to St. Cloud, and it was after the first semester, just needed to come home, and that was, we hoped she would, actually, and she did, but then went on to go to college. And and how she dealt with it, I think, unfortunately, I think she felt very alone, because as parents with another child to be concerned about, it's hard, because you're doing what you can to survive yourself, and you have this other young adult, and even those families who are left with younger children. I do remember thinking I was so glad that I didn't have little children to deal with, because I thought, how would I be effective as a mom to little ones, who wouldn't be affected nearly as much by, they are resilient, and they would need different type of care to help them with the loss of a sibling. And with Jill, she kind of, and her friends, kids that age, I don't know how to help each other either. And they were all so devastated, because, in that group, Tim was everybody's little brother, just like their brothers were Jill's little, it was just, it was so intertwined that the pain was just, it was so palpable and so intense. So it was hard. And, even to this day, I think Jill has had to just deal with it herself. I mean, she's been married for over 20 years. She's, 3 kids, and, has a good job, and, she's okay, but it certainly changed her life. As she said, I never wanted to be an only child, and we did adopt Brandon, but they are 20 years apart in age, and he has cerebral palsy. So, the type of relationships is very different than she knew she could have had with Tim and his wife and his kids, and all that is not there. It's a big hole, to this day in our family, for sure. Yeah. But the one thing I wanted to mention that we always are very aware of when we work with couples in our grief groups, we have a group called Gone Too Soon, that we facilitate twice a month, and we unfortunately have a lot of couples that do come together, and we always want them to make sure they're figuring out how they're going to do this as a couple, because we know that the rate of divorce is heightened when this happens. It can take its toll on a marriage, and especially if a marriage is already a little shaky, it can have devastating results. So we talked to them about that, and what Dick and I learned is we learned how to let each other grieve. There could be days when maybe Dick had gone off to work and had a pretty okay day, thought, I'm okay today, to come home and hear me downstairs in Tim's bedroom, hugging his pillow and wailing, and vice versa. I had the same experience with him multiple times, but we learned that it wasn't either of our jobs to try to pull each other out of that pit at that moment, because I think we walk around trying not to get to that point, and then finally there's nothing left to do but that.